This is Freethought Forum, a program by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee. I'm Faithless Forrest.
And I'm Riv.
And we want you to know...
Yes, sorry. We want you to know that if you don't believe in God, you are not alone. Right here in the East Tennessee, you can find Free-Thinking Atheists Agnostics. This is a show for them and for people committed to a life rooted in science and unfettered by supernatural beliefs.
All right. On today's show, we shall ask the question, should the churches be taxed? But first, we want to tell viewers about the sponsors of our show. All right, you're up again.
All right. So the Atheist Society of Knoxville frequently has a fun meetup at a bar and eatery. Tonight's meetup is at Barley's in the Old City, starting around 5:30. Look for the silver-jacketed copy of the God Delusion standing upright on the table. And as Matt Dillahunty at the Atheist Experience says, everyone is welcome to our happy hour for food, drink, and conversation. But if you plan to preach, proselytize, provoke, or punch, please don't.
The Rationalists of East Tennessee have several regular monthly meetings. The first and third Sunday mornings of the month are usually lectures with lively roundtable discussions. The second Sunday, we hold the Skeptics Book Club. We'll have more on that later. On the fourth Sunday, we're mixing it up sometimes with a get-together we call a reflections meeting. It features a potluck at someone's home, and sometimes we meet to play board games or see movies or similar activities. And in fact, last weekend, we had one of our Adopt a Highway pickups. I didn't make it to that one, but they tell me that the winds from Hurricane Matthew were blowing the trash bags down the road. Did you make it?
No, I didn't make that one. I made the first one. I just this one. But.
All righty.
All right. So, sorry. Yeah, later in the show, we'll give you a website for additional information, details, times, locations.
All righty. Well, in the news, yesterday, the October 10th, the Rationalists of East Tennessee got a redo of the Oak Ridge City Council invocation. Last January, our secular celebrant, Alita Ledendecker, was cut off before the allotted time. And so we had kind of a makeup date, and I guess it went off pretty smoothly. And maybe next week, maybe we'll have a video for you to share with viewers on that. Did you bring anything for in the news?
Well, actually, I was on the mention of the invocation. I was able to attend that, and it was nice.
We have an eyewitness.
Yes. And then I forget his name, but we had more than one speech, and the resident of the area, and really good quote that went back to about all this suggesting of having invocations before meetings. It was suggested to just end the invocations because it was quoted where to pray in private is honored and rather than being openly about it and so on. And in the good speech before that with Miss Alita, she wasn't cut off, so that was good. And it was all really pleasant. Well, we left a little while afterwards, but it was good proceeding.
All right, so there was citizen input requesting an end to prayer before city meetings. City council meetings, I guess it's called?
Right.
All righty. Well, that's great. Hopefully you've planted some seeds that will ripen into greater freedoms for us. All righty. Well, so let's talk, let's move on to today's program and get our title slide up. Today's topic was motivated by a discussion at a recent RET meeting. A member there asserted that even the best-in-class churches only give about 18% to helping others, meaning to charity. And this turned into a discussion about how even that might be contingent upon recipients listening to proselytization.
Right, so let's talk about that special treatment for churches. So you're challenging for...
The title?
For right. So challenging the IRS non-filing requirements churches. So churches are being directly referenced to 501c3 of the Internal Revenue Code. are exempt from payment of income taxes because they generally operate in a charitable manner. Additionally, on top of tax exemption, churches, unlike other exempt organizations, have been graced with several additional benefits.
For instance, churches are not required to file a tax exemption application with the IRS upon formation, or prepare and file an annual information return with the IRS. That's a Form 990. We've got one here, and maybe we'll dig into that at some point in the show.
It's fun.
And they're not; they don't report the identities of their significant donors to the IRS. In other words, money is being sent to churches without there being public record.
Churches have also the benefit of not being as susceptible to IRS audits as compared to other exempt organizations as a result of Section 7611 of the Internal Revenue Code and the parsonage allowance, which permits church ministers to essentially receive tax-free housing.
All right, so these were points that we didn't dream up. We found this on a website called YH Advisors, and it looks like they may specialize in doing accounting advice for tax-exempt organizations. I didn't read all of what their website was about. So let's talk, I guess, a little bit about the history of that. The next slide gives us an example. Tax exemptions for the church goes way back to the Roman Empire. I guess it happened with, the first emperor who made the Roman Empire Christian, Constantine. I guess it was his idea. So that's how long tax exemption has been going on. Now, in those days, there wasn't this idea of separation of church and state. And in fact, the church had this role of, sort of supporting the state. And so thus, they kind of did the same. They gave the church a tax-free status, which is at least an indirect support. But taxing the church is not something that we just dreamed up here. In the mid-1800s, Ulysses S. Grant, yes, that guy, he apparently wrote or said the following: I believe the church property in the United States which paid no tax amounted to 87 million. And in 1900, so far in the future for him,
right,
without check, it is safe to say this property will reach a sum exceeding 3 billion. I would suggest the taxation of all property equally.
And from a surprising source, the website Catholic.org reported in 2015 that Pope Francis made quite the statement. In their headlines reads, Pope Francis to church, help the needy or pay taxes. And the website goes on to say, Pope Francis calls out for churches who are using facilities as profit centers instead of helping the poor.
So using facilities as profit centers. I've never attended church regularly, but for a couple of years I worked in or near Nashville, Tennessee, and one of my coworkers belonged to I think it's a Baptist church. Yes, I'm in Tennessee, almost inevitably a Baptist church in Lebanon, where we would go after work and play racquetball because they had a racquetball course and a great big gymnasium for basketball. And, so it was a weekday evening, and, there were church members there playing basketball and, doing physical activity. And there were a lot of young people, the kind of physical activity that, young people need. That's a good thing. But, there are businesses where you pay to play racquetball and or engage in physical activities for exercise. So when the church is doing this, in a sense, what this is doing is it is competing against private businesses. They are at least playing in the same market space with that, physical exercise facility as private business. This has nothing to do with what we think of as church missions, and even begging the question or ignoring the question of how valid it is that preaching hellfire to someone has some value that should be so great that it should be not taxed. And they weren't helping needy strangers with these facilities. They weren't, well, I was allowed in. I wasn't a member, but I was allowed in because I came with a member.
Well, something you mentioned there reminds me of, it was back in Maryville. You used to live there. You know Thunder Road or Thunder World? You got converted.
No, but go on.
Oh,
For my benefit as well as benefit others as viewers, what is this Thunder Road of which you speak?
Well, I think I confused World and Road. I was thinking of the Dollywood.
There's a roller coaster, I think.
Right, but Thunder, I want to say World, maybe, it could be off on that. But it was right across from where where Buddy's Barbecue is now, across the median. And went there for years when I was much younger. But it was a place that had a bowling alley, an arcade, a go-kart. It's an all-out entertainment center.
Really, go-karts?
Go-karts in the back.
I live not too far from that, and I didn't realize we had go-karts anywhere nearby.
It is all there in the back. And it used to be a for-profit entertainment center, much like you go to Pigeon Forge and just pick a building all over the place.
Uh-huh.
And it got turned into a church. I think it's called, now I'll have to look it up, but Faith something maybe, but it got turned into a church.
And they still have go-karts?
With all the amenities attached to it. And so it brings into mention, wait a minute, this is really luring to people to just come in and say, look, we can go to this church and have fun with all these theatrical attractions.
So we can have faith-based go-karting?
Apparently, yeah.
They're running go-karts?
Right, yeah, you get credits.
Oh, man, we need to have a race. See if prayer or perhaps a little tweak on the carburetor governor will do more towards winning the race.
We make our bets and make projections,
All right, well, I'm not a betting person.
Just came to mind.
Yeah, I tend to be like an old stick in the mud. Carrie Nation, goodness, she was trying to stop drinking, but what is it? I'm sort of like a prohibitionist when it comes to that. I'm just appalled by government lotteries and stuff like that, because it's truly taking advantage of people who don't understand the realities of probability. It is deceitful of government to be involved in betting. All right. So, well, I'll have to swing by 321 and peer over there and see what we can see.
Yeah, Faith Hope Church or something like that. It's a big thing.
All righty. So, but as they say, wait, there's more. The Catholic Republic website reports that back in 2013, Pope Francis said, "I would love a church that is poor." And I think we got a slide for that one. I'd love a church that is poor.
That sounds familiar. Talked about that recently.
Yeah, well, it's certainly a very common criticism of the Catholic Church is that, they've got tremendous wealth in terms of property. I think they're the largest property owner in Italy. And there's been discussion in Italy of taxing the church because, when you get all of this sequestered wealth that's not paying taxes, the others begin to resent it. And I think church attendance has fallen off a lot. And so, it's probably time for them to get smaller, give up some of that property if they can't afford to pay tax on it. All righty. So from Ulysses S. Grant to Pope Francis, woohoo. And viewers, we have a call. Are you ready? Hello, caller. Can you give us a name or a nickname, please?
A caller is just fine.
All right, caller. So, have you called to comment about today's topic, or one of your own?
No, this is a subject near and dear to my heart. I couldn't wait for you to get through with the other stuff you were talking about to call in.
All right.
what you're talking about here is churches getting a tax-free status for both property tax and income tax, and I believe you're touching upon now how the churches are using their tax-free status to invest in property, which they can let accrue in value and then later on sell it, and also the fact that the churches compete with other businesses, for example, gyms, daycare centers, youth activities, and also such things as paying for gas for church trips to Gatlinburg. I don't know how many times I've been in line at a pizza parlor and people are using tax numbers in order not to pay taxes, or buying cinnamon rolls at McDonald's and not paying taxes on it because it's a church status. But I see an even bigger problem here is not that the churches are doing it, not that it's the mainstream that's doing it, but then you have all of these other little weird people that are declaring themselves to be churches and using the same tax evasion. And I'm calling it that, even though that is a crime. So you have the Church of, Scientology, that virtually owns a city down in Florida, where you have the church doing things like owning radio tax-free stations. And then you have people like this asinine satanic temple who are also getting tax-free status.
Caller, I may have to interject. There are actually two satanic temples, but there's one called the Satanic Temple. And if I remember correctly, they have not applied for tax-exempt status because they essentially implied that that would be unethical.
Well, as a matter of fact, I agree with the unethical part, but there are satanic temples out there getting tax-free status.
Right.
So if a Christian or if a churchgoer was to ask themselves, should I be in favor of taxing my church, such as the Catholic Pope, as you mentioned just then, should you be in favor of it? And the answer is yes, because not only will your church get it taxed, but 100 other churches will get it taxed. And what that will mean is there's a whole lot more money coming back into the community. I was doing some tax investigating several years ago, and there was a property alongside Kingston Pike. At that time, it was a hardware store, and they were paying $30,000 a year in taxes to Knox County for property tax.
Uh-huh.
And then it was bought by a church. I wish I could give you their name. I don't have any problem with that, but I can't remember it right offhand. And they put up a convention center, and then I looked at this church. The taxes dropped from $30,000 a year to like $2,000 a year because they had a snack bar there. So,
meaning that they were still paying
these churches to go into a business. These are no longer churches. We're not just making it tax-free for their sacred area where they pray, but for buildings and everything else. Over on Morrell Avenue, the Baptist headquarters is there. They have no church activity going on there. It's just offices. They are tax-free. Then you have then in Knoxville, we also have churches that own apartment buildings. Now, I don't think they're allowed to be tax-free as far as the property goes, but still they're under the church auspices. But then we have a bunch of people that are getting tax-free status off this. And though I hate to say it, we have a rationalist group here in Knoxville that has also declared themselves as a church in order to not pay taxes.
So technically, the Rationalists of East Tennessee is a 501c, not church, because church is kind of a Christian
501c, tax-exempt church, religious tax exemption.
A tax-exempt religious organization. And
right.
Now we have to say, per the IRS, what does a religious organization mean? What qualifies as a religious organization? Caller, do you know?
Simply you saying you're a religious organization is
No.
just about it.
No. The IRS has actually a rather clever definition. You are a church if you have a congregation.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what that does is it excludes these radio ministries. So these people who own a radio transmitter and want to spread their word on the FMs and AM stations, they are not churches and they're not entitled to that exemption.
Excuse me, but
Yep.
they are.
Oh, well, now, that turns into the question of, do they have a congregation? Now, if some of them make a plausible claim they've got a congregation, then it slides through. But the way the rules are written, if you've got a congregation, then you can qualify as this religious organization. Notice it's not church, because mosques would work, Jewish temples would work, Scientologists, whatever they call themselves when they get together, would work, and freethinkers, when they get together, works.
So freethinkers are a church.
We are a congregation.
But that's beside the point. What we're talking about.
Caller, you missed my
abuse of
point.
taxes.
The word church is not used in the definition. And the reason is that the IRS is loath to have a specific definition, because that puts them into being someone who is granting official status to a church, and they don't want to do that. They realize that's a can of worms that they want to keep their hands out of. So it works out. If you've got a congregation, you are. Now, it would be interesting to find out how many radio ministries have congregations, and that would be a great thing for research, but we didn't have time for this. We thought of this topic, I think it was it Sunday we thought of this topic? Yeah, so we haven't, we're working on things for a couple days worth of research.
John Patrick Michael Murphy is a freethinker in Colorado Springs, and he was on a big movement, Colorado Springs, to tax the churches. Colorado has a special tax exemption as far as the state laws, that if you headquartered your church in their state, you receive much more tax unliabilities.
Yeah.
So consequently, you have the headquarters for a bunch of churches now in Colorado, and in the Colorado Springs area. But this is getting to be a business. So if I was a church-going person, I would say, yes, go ahead and tax me. Let's make it taxable. Let's make it above board, because there's just too much room for abuse. I hope I've made my case, or at least shared what my irritation with your subject. I hope somebody else will go ahead and call in.
All right. Well, thank you so much. For the benefit of other viewers, have you watched before?
Oh, yeah, I believe. Yeah. Oh, yeah, I've watched before.
And are you local?
Yes, I am.
All right. Well, thanks so much for giving us a call today, caller.
Thank you.
All righty. Well, that was great, and in fact, I'm really glad I got the opportunity to talk about the qualifications for the church, and that is having a congregation. There are some other qualifications. In particular, you've got to have a program that is, without saying it quite this way, it's like a program to institute community morals and values in children. And the Rationalists of East Tennessee has that in the form of current sponsorship or past sponsorship of children's organizations. All righty. So right before the call came, I was trying to lead up and say, well, we've had such diversity of persons arguing for taxing the church, of a former president and a current pope. So let's maybe talk about some of the pros and cons of taxing the church here. You want to grab one and read it, and then we'll maybe talk about it.
Right, I guess I'll show that one. So church users benefit from government services just all the same, just all the same the other taxpayers do.
All righty, so the people who are going to church, they're driving on the roads. The people who are going to church are receiving the benefit of the national defense, and yet they're not paying for it. What other government services do they benefit from?
Well,
The public right-of-ways that brings power, telephone.
yeah, I was thinking of a list mentality. Something also is I think part of the kind of complacent perception, and that's kind of widespread. It's thought that if a church is of the status, as most do, then it would follow almost de facto that. Well, it's following off what you said. I think you already said it, but
Okay. All right, well, let's grab this next item. It says taxes could be on income. This is under the pro-tax column. It could be on income or perhaps on assets and property, especially for churches that are accumulating large amounts of property. Yeah, it makes sense that maybe that should be taxed. Whereas if income represents, in a sense, their members' willingness to do good, and if they are doing good for the community, then that maybe would be an easier thing. In other words, these are things that perhaps could be details and negotiated in a pro-tax, for a pro-tax argument.
well, and it was also mentioned earlier that if you're using profits, well, I should be careful with how I say profits. If you're using intake from donations and from various sources, and you eventually come to acquire land, which is not taxed or taxed significantly less than other non-exempt would have, then that does, I think, become very problematic, and it becomes an endless chain. It's like almost if you put a big nest egg in something, and it builds over time.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like a nest egg that has legs. It's out doing things, and it's not adding up.
Yeah, well, and in the case, as I said, of Italy, I know the Catholic Church is a huge owner of property to the point where it's kind of starving the civil society. Viewers, we've been trying to remember to ask lately on our shows, how's our sound? Are we loud enough? Any distortion? And if you want to give us a call at the number on the screen and let us know how we're sounding, and also be prepared to tell the call screener which cable system you're on, or if you're watching us streaming online, that kind of thing.
I think it's a bit quiet, so sorry.
Yeah, well, and I know we've been struggling with the volume levels here in the studio today. All righty. You want to grab the next idea here.
Right, and we also have that tax returns should be public record for transparency on the benefit of the church's claim they provide to members and non-members.
And of course, I wrote that, and I guess what I had in mind is that if the churches are to remain tax-free, at least we should have transparency. So maybe now's the time to talk about this Form 990. Form 990. Look at all these little lines on here. There's 22 little lines here, ignoring the signature block, and pages, and pages, 38 lines, several sections where the numbers, so something like about 40 lines per page, and there are 12 pages of this. This is what a tax-exempt organization that is not a church is expected to fill out every year. And I guess the point I would like to make, or the assertion or challenge, is that if you're asking for a break on your taxes, the taxpayers really ought to be able to see what it is you're doing so that we can decide if that has merit. Now, I guess this is an income tax statement. Let's talk. I know a little bit about property tax. Part of what I'm about to say is from reading the Freedom from Religion approximately monthly newsletter called Freethought Today. And that is that there have been instances, or I remember an article at least, where a church had this great big sign on their property that was, leased to a sign company. And I think what happened is a Freethought group had put up a sign like across the street or something from them, and this church, contacted the media and protested how this was such a terrible thing, that people were expressing the idea that if you don't believe in God, you're not alone, which caused them to get looked at, and it was discovered that the sign on their property was not paying tax. Now, the way this works is that if a church has a sign, then a portion of the property that it's on has to be allocated to the sign, and let's say if that's 10% of the property, then they need to pay at least, they're supposed to pay then 10% of what the property would be, tax would be for that size property, plus the sign itself is an improvement and has a tax associated with it. And this church hadn't been doing that. So, as a reward for their neighborly behavior, they got audited and were forced to pay not merely the current taxes, but back taxes for however many years until the grace period had fallen. I think a lot of tax things, it's like 7 years. If you've made a mistake more than 7 years old, well, it gets ignored. So the point being is that a property tax thing would maybe keep churches focused on doing good in the community, which is something like the alleged reason that they're given this tax break, not for amassing big property. Well, we've gone past the halfway point. What do you say we move to the mid-program break here? Okay. And if Sam could help get ready for all of that. So in case you're just tuning in, this is Freethought Forum, a program by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee. Freethought Forum is funded jointly by them and by individual contributions.
Shows are live most Tuesdays from 5 to 6 p.m. Eastern on Knoxville Community Access Television Channel 12 or Channel 194, depending on your local cable network. Tell your out-of-town friends to see us streaming online at ctvknox.org.
Today's show is live October 11th, 2016. And you can call in on the number on the screen and speak to us. And while we take a short break, please watch these informative videos about ASK and RET. All right, do we have the video? Shazam.
Area and are questioning your religious beliefs or simply believe in one less God than
Are we
everyone
muted?
else? Well, you're not alone. The Atheist Society of Knoxville is a fun and friendly group of people just like you that meets twice a week at a bar or restaurant. We meet every Tuesday night following the show at Barley's Tap Room and Pizzeria for happy hour. You'll find our group either inside or on the patio. Look for Richard Dawkins' silver-jacketed book, The God Delusion, standing upright on the table. On Fridays, we meet at Agave Azul or the Beard and Beer Market. But if you plan to preach, proselytize, provoke, or punch, please don't. We all question what we believe at one point in our lives. If this is the time for you, come join us for food, education, and fun. Do you find stories of talking snakes laughable? Do you prefer the scientific method over supernatural beliefs? Are you concerned about religious leaders and organizations imposing their values and rules on your body, your family, and the rest of our society? Well, take comfort in the fact that you're not alone. The Rationalists of East Tennessee meets weekly for fellowship and provides a forum for people who support skeptical thinking and rational discussion of these and other issues. To find out more information or to find out about our next meeting, visit us on the web at www.rationalist.org.
Those two.
Yes.
We're back.
Back, all right. The Atheist Society of Knoxville, or ASK, meets 1 or 2 times a week. We have evening meetups for fun, food, drink, and conversation. You can find us online at knoxvilleatheists.org. The purpose of the Ask is to supply a venue for community, camaraderie, and outreach to atheists, agnostics, freethinkers, and other like-minded persons in the East Tennessee area. Our Tuesday meeting is going on now at Barlow's Tap Room and Pizzeria in the Knoxville Old City. Recently, some of us helped out in the RET Adopt a Highway pickup on the Pellsip Parkway, which was considered, I believe, to be at the aftermath of Alita's speech. Again,
Invocation at the Oak Ridge City Council.
It was suggested by, I think, someone who was representative there, I recall her name, from the FFRF, that apparently that we're considered the best crew for the Adopt a Highway.
Yeah, the feedback we've got is that we're the most diligent. We do the pickup about 4 times a year, about quarterly. The one in the summer is sometimes problematic because it's tough to get out there under the hot, approximately July sun. And in fact, what we've done is we've scheduled it for kind of, early evening so that the sun's not burning down on us. All right, well, and the second Sunday of most months is the Rationalists of East Tennessee's Skeptics Book Club. The title of the next book is The Invention of the Jewish People by, and I'm going to mangle this guy's name, Shlomo Sand? All right. And this will be Sunday, November 13th at 2 p.m. The public is invited to participate. You need not have read the book to attend, but of course it helps. Visit rationalist.org to find the rest of the book club calendar and join us at the, well, sort of still feels new, I guess we've been there a couple of years, location, Books A Million, 8513 Kingston Pike, Knoxville, Tennessee. All right, now we need to figure out where we left off.
We're right up here
in our program. It's good you were paying attention. You just start and I'll catch up.
All right. So taxing the church, this was actually mentioned already when we were talking about it earlier. Taxing the churches is not a new idea.
Okay.
President Ulysses Grant advocated for it in the 1800s.
All righty. All right, now I have another kind of question that's pro-tax. Why should doctors who really do heal the sick and who really do sometimes cure the lame and cure the blind pay taxes, and churches who seem to have kind of gotten altogether out of that business no longer pay taxes and are no longer helping to support the public burden?
And even push it to the point where you have your as here just came to mind, the mega churches, your Copeland, the prosperity gospel. I mean, it's heinous that we look into it, the history of there were mics that people come in and they come to crowd members and they somehow miraculously know about their situation, at home, where their concerns are. And it's because they take the pamphlet cards you sign when you sign in, and they take them back there and they have a mic and they'll wire it through it, and it's how they get their clairvoyance is, how's your brother doing? I know you had a real concern on your heart, and I want to tell you. And it's like candy, it angers me thinking about it.
Yeah, well, if you read the Bible like I have, they apparently claim that Christ and the apostles used to go around curing people. And in fact, really until about the 1800s, when medicine began to really become effective, the church at least gave, let's call it, a placebo effect. But the reason that Ulysses Grant, among others, in the emerging Freethought community of the 1800s, even existed, is because it was obvious that science and learning about the natural world could produce a better way to live than what the church had been providing for, at that time, something like 1,800 years. And what happened is gradually the church stopped claiming that it was going to cure people by driving out demons, and its sphere of influence became smaller. What you hear mostly now is that, oh, we teach morals. You know, you hear that a lot. And of course they claim often that they have a monopoly on morals because they get it from a holy book. And we've had callers here call in and say, where do you get your morals from? And so, Riv, where do you get your morals from if you don't believe in a holy book?
Well, glad you asked for that. Observing others and having been raised, watch my mom, other family, friends, this notion you watch, you observe, you see, you have empathy, it extends to this hurts, that doesn't hurt. It's difficult to pin down, but it doesn't feel like it's any kind of holy source. It just feels like we're alive now and we should treat each other well. And does it poor justice? There's a quote from a YouTuber. Pretty sure I have it somewhere on here. Actually, let me, one moment, if I can look it up.
All righty. And I'll share with viewers, so when you mentioned one of the sources was your mother. And I very clearly remember I was pretty young, and I'm sure I was, throwing a temper tantrum. And my mother, basically asked me to be empathetic. She asked, how would you feel if someone was doing this to you? Or she asked me to have a perspective outside myself, and apparently I was old enough to do it. And, I don't remember what I was misbehaving about, but I do remember thinking, oh my goodness, I've got to do better. And I'm guessing I was about a 4-year-old or something at that time. And, so I began to feel a burden of, trying to behave to meet my mother's expectations as well as the expectation that I would want to have, my own self. But it was mother's encouragement to do that.
Right.
Did you find your quote?
I did, and the thing is, it's difficult more too because I'm not often in the habit of just articulating it, but it's up there. It's one of those things where it's difficult to explain, but you feel it because it becomes what's considered common sense, but common sense isn't common sense. It's an amalgamation of your knowledge over a lifetime. But so I think this really well articulates it from a YouTuber. A particular action or choice is moral or right when it somehow promotes happiness, well-being, or health, or it somehow minimizes unnecessary harm or suffering, or it does both. A particular action or choice is immoral or wrong when it somehow diminishes happiness, well-being, or health, or again, it somehow causes unnecessary harm or suffering, or does both. I mean, I think it's pretty straightforward.
There was an interview on a radio program that I listened to, I think it was The Infidel Guy, and he was interviewing Dan Barker. Dan Barker is one of the co-presidents of the Freedom from Religion Foundation, and Dan expressed it like this. He was trying to go through life minimizing harm. Minimizing harm. And I think part of that is a realization that we exist and consume resources, and we're competing against others, and to the extent that we outcompete them, we somewhat harm them, and that we should be cognizant of that. In other words, don't be selfish. And certainly don't try to get an unfair advantage by using falsehoods. Don't lie. Let's see, don't take someone else's life. Oh, that would be, do not murder. All right, and we're getting a signal. Why don't you push the button and greet the caller?
Hello, caller. Can you hear us?
Yes, I'm here.
Give us a name or a nickname, please. Will. Hello, did I hear Will? All right, Will, speak up a little if you can and give us a comment or a question.
Okay, I'm talking a little bit more loudly. Can you hear me fine?
That helped, yes, thank you.
Okay, good. Well, I've come across the show, I've seen it a time or two before, and I come across the show talking about should churches be taxed, but then you get onto the subject of absolute morality or not. And so the question is, in regard to morality, is there such a thing as absolute morality?
I would say on certain subjects, yes, and on certain subjects, no. So,
how do you know that there's absolute morality on certain subjects?
So I'm going to say absolute because I believe I can empathize and understand that other living creatures can feel pain, and it is immoral to inflict unnecessary pain.
Let's say, for example, I'm born in 1920, I'm a German, and my society believes that it's all right and it's proper to kill the Jewish people. Or more recently, let's say that I'm in the black community and I think that police officers are killing my people, and I think it's good and proper to kill police officers.
And I made the argument that we should be moral, that we should be moral to one another because we should empathize. That empathy is the root of significant, if not all, morality.
How do you know that?
As a child, my mother encouraged me to think that, and I've found nothing in life to contradict that. In other words,
but, how do you critique the person that disagrees with you in regard to killing police officers or the Jews back in Nazi Germany? What if there's a society that says that's okay and it's right, it's good to do?
Then I would try to escape from that society.
So therefore, in your own opinion, subjectively, it's not correct, but you really can't critique their society for thinking that way.
I think it's irrelevant to even have that conversation. Meaning,
no, it's not. It actually happened and is happening.
I understand that happened, but it's irrelevant to ask the question the way you did. It's irrelevant to say that we should critique it. I will be glad to condemn it, and I will say that bad things will come of that.
How do you critique it? If it's subjective?
So it has nothing to do with being objective or subjective. It is, when I critique it, I'm going to make an argument, and that argument is that I don't want to do things to others that, I wouldn't want done to me, and they shouldn't either, and that they should recognize that, and then I would encourage them, just like my mother did, to try and think outside themselves.
Should implies oughtness or an absolute, therefore you're saying there is absolute morality?
No, you cannot twist my words that way. I am merely using the observation of what it is like to live and invoking empathy.
Well, that's fine for you, but what if I think that I should go out and kill those that are against me?
So let's say that there are three of us stranded on a desert island. You, Will, Rev, and myself. If I think that, if you've given us honest reason to believe that you're prepared to kill us, Rev and I have to kill you, because neither one of us have the resources to stay awake just to guard you. We got to sleep. We got to go forage for food there on Gilligan's Island or wherever we are. We have no choice but to kill you. On the other hand, if we live in a society with sufficient surplus wealth, we can potentially merely imprison you to protect ourselves and others.
So power makes right?
No, actually it's wealth gives us choices.
Wealth makes right?
Wealth gives us choices. Please don't twist my words. Wealth gives us choices.
I'm talking about absolute right and wrong.
Well, you're absolutely wrong to break this down into a false dichotomy. Rev, I've used a lot of this time. Do you want to talk to Will on any of this?
Right, so something that was mentioned was absoluteness. I think that something that's never really taken into consideration is that we can only go off of what we know and what we can observe. And if we can observe an extension of empathy, of someone being harmed, of someone feeling harmed, or ourselves being harmed, it all becomes, we understand more of it. And to assert something, to know absolutely, and absolutely I think is kind of a trepidatious kind of topic, but even so, we can only go so far as we can understand it, such as, what is it, Kant, right? It reduced it back down to the basics of...
I've not read Kant, so I can't help you on that.
Well, essentially, he asserted that we cannot know anything. So what we can start from is what we can experience. And you have the phrase, I think, therefore I am.
That's Descartes.
Descartes, right, Descartes, okay, my bad. I'm sorry. I confused my philosophers. I'm big, read a lot and miss the names.
All right, so Will, I've attempted to answer your question. Part of it is that I just simply refuse to use the vocabulary you used. Do you understand the nature of my answer?
I understand it. I still think we have a disagreement because I will reason that there is absolute moral law
Now,
that is above.
you asked me where I got mine.
Yeah.
Now it's your turn.
Okay. There is an absolute moral law that can be defined above societal norms, as I've just demonstrated. Therefore, there has to be an absolute lawgiver. That's an argument for the existence of an absolute lawgiver or God.
Well, and so once again, I have to say, no, you cannot infer a lawgiver because of laws. Once again, that's just like a linguistic mistake.
No, that's not correct. It's logical. If there is absolute law,
okay, well, you haven't proven
societal influence, then there has to be a lawgiver that is beyond societal. That's higher than society.
So in reality, you've failed on all accounts. You've not proven.
You do not understand me.
You've not proven that there is an absolute law, and then you've made an erroneous leap that there has to be a lawgiver. Now,
You're defying logic, sir.
In the world of science, well, logic has things makes assertions about the combination of truth and assertions, such as a true and a true remains true. A true and a not true is false. That's what logic is. That's combination.
I'm very familiar with logic, sir.
Yeah, and nowhere is there a logic thing that says a law implies a lawgiver. Nowhere.
I'd be glad to debate you on that subject if you'd like to.
Well, we're kind of doing that right now, and the way you determine truth in the mathematical world is you make you say, I think I've got this rule, and you test it, and if you find exceptions, then you know the rule is wrong. In other words, we make an appeal to either the observable world or the world of mathematical logic and the axioms that came with. You cannot infer outside the axioms, and you're inferring outside the axioms when you say...
That is not correct. Now, if you want to critique a person
all right.
who was born back in Nazi Germany and
Will,
killed Jews, do you think that was wrong? And if so, how do you do that?
Will, we have 30 seconds. We've had some back and forth here, and I think I've already answered that question. So I invite you to call back again on a future show.
I will be glad to engage you in more formal debate. If you'd like to have me, I'll be glad to do so. You may call me at any time.
All righty. Well, we'll consider that. Quick question, though. Will, are you local?
Yes.
All right. And I think you did say you've watched before. So we're down at Barley's Tap Room and Pizzeria. And if you come there, some of us like to engage people who have a different worldview. We'll need to sit down on the end of the table where we don't annoy those who just as soon be left out.
When do you all meet? I'd be glad to come down and visit.
All right, we're at Barley's Tap Room Pizzeria Tuesday nights. We're there. There's some of us there right now. We got to say goodbye so we can sign off timely.
Have a good day.
All right. Quick, we got 30 seconds. You just start. I'll pick up somewhere.
Right. Okay, so if you want feedback, you can call us, voicemail 865-272-9060 or freethoughtforum@yahoo.com.
All right, opinions expressed on this show are of the hosts and guests, not any official opinion of ASK or RET. We'd like to thank Leah and Sam for technical support, the staff at Knoxville CTX Knoxville, and to all of our viewers and callers, remember, if you don't believe in God, you're not a